Eguchi Aota lay alone in a hospital bed with only the cold machines answering him in slow beeps. Fighting for each breath, he wondered if this was truly how his life would end. He turned toward a photo of his parents, and the memories he had buried came crashing back. He thought about how he had been hospitalized since childhood and had spent more than half of his 20 years in rooms like this. He remembered that, at first, his father and mother had genuinely worried about him. He recalled that the last gift they ever gave him was a baseball and glove for his 10th birthday. Right after putting that present in his hands, they told him they were going to have a second child. Crying in despair, he asked himself what his life had even meant if it was all ending in this emptiness. In that final desperation, he wished he could be born again with a healthy body. Eguchi Aota died at 20, and with no one at his side, he slipped away completely alone. After dying in solitude, Aota opened his eyes inside a strange magic circle and went rigid with confusion. He hurriedly looked around, saw hooded figures nearby, and his confusion instantly turned into alarm. Surrounded by cloaked strangers, he dropped to the floor and realized he had been dragged somewhere unknown. The robed onlookers stared in shock that the one they had summoned was a man, and disappointment spread through the room. One of them complained that after pouring so much energy into the summoning, this result was a bitter failure. A blonde girl stepped forward, welcomed him to their realm, and introduced herself as Luclara Harme. Luclara calmly explained that she was the princess of that kingdom. Hearing that, Aota was shaken as the idea of another world and reincarnation all of a sudden stopped feeling impossible. He remembered all the reincarnation stories he had read on his phone in a hospital, and the memories flooded back at once. For someone who had spent his whole life sick, the thought of being reborn felt like a miracle he had waited for forever. Aota looked at Luclara and quickly realized this was nothing like the easy fantasy world he had imagined. He panicked and insisted to himself that something this absurd could not be real, so it had to be a dream. Then, his eyes caught an awkward detail of Luclara's appearance, and his thoughts right away began to spiral. Luclara noticed his reaction at once and fell into a strange silence. Aota blurted out in reckless excitement that a girl this cute and dazzling was the kind he had only ever seen on a screen. While the cloaked group stared in confusion, Aota convinced himself that if this was only a dream, then maybe nothing he did mattered. He forced himself to calm down and finally asked the real question of why they had summoned him. Luclara hesitated, and even the hooded woman beside her looked uneasy as she tried to begin. From the center of the magic circle, Aota sat hemmed in by robed figures as the pressure in the chamber kept rising. A long silence followed, and the vast hall made Luclara's discomfort and Aota's uncertainty feel heavier by the second. Luclara nervously explained that she had seen a dream of a monster horde destroying the kingdom, then declared that this vision was her special ability. The surrounding figures reacted in confusion and called out Tiamat's name the moment Luclara finished speaking. Luclara added that scouts had already been sent on dragons, and their estimate said roughly 1.5 million monsters would arrive in about 7 days. Aota was stunned and repeated the number in disbelief, shaken by how little time remained. Luclara grimly revealed that no reinforcements could be expected from the neighboring countries. Aota bitterly thought about how he had spent his entire life bedridden. Looking down at the summoning circle, he concluded that a crisis like this was far beyond someone like him. Luclara gently explained that in a summoning ritual, what mattered most was the soul's strength and the convictions a person carried from their previous world. Her words made Aota remember his old wish that if he were ever reborn, he would want a stronger, healthier body. Then his thoughts drifted toward all the things his broken old life had always kept out of reach. Aota all of a sudden panicked as those reckless thoughts made him wonder if his rebirth had burdened him with impulses he found deeply embarrassing. Luclara gently offered him a ring to wear, trying to guide him into the next step of the ritual. She explained that it was the Beister ring, a sacred tool from one of Linanevil's 10 true gods that read a person's life force and displayed it as a status. Aota admired the device, and Luclara told him to focus on the ring and chant Beister. He followed her instructions and invoked the ring's name. A status screen appeared before him, and Aota was stunned to learn that his class attribute was Incubus and his skill was Celestial Emperor of Desire. As Luclara watched, Aota felt horrified that his aptitude and skill made him sound like some kind of deviant. He then noticed that his stat numbers looked painfully low. Luclara calmly explained that his stats were average for a human man, but in this world women were generally stronger. She added that most people who reached master rank and most who became heroes were women, leaving Aota to realize he was ordinary and weak. Hooded onlookers complained that the kingdom's hope had turned out to be a man of all people, and they scorned Aota as an incubus who could never save them. Luclara abruptly silenced the crowd before their words could cut him any deeper. Holding back tears, Luclara declared that they were the ones who had summoned Lord Aota, and no one had the right to insult him. The others lowered their heads, and one of them reached out with a hesitant gesture of apology. Luclara apologized for the offense and promised that they would take full responsibility until Lord Auda was safely returned, while Auda admitted he might not be able to get used to this world. Auda revealed that he had been bedridden in his previous world, and the memory drove him to confess that he did not want to go back. Even so, he steadied himself and decided that before making any choice, he needed to inspect the details of his skills. Luclara brightened at once and eagerly agreed with his decision. She explained that to view a skill's details, he only had to focus his mind on the specific part he wanted to examine. Auda concentrated on the status screen, selected his skill, and a new panel opened to reveal its detailed information. The skill description revealed that his power could only be learned by someone deeply tied to intense human longing, and that it would grow stronger by accumulating that kind of experience. Auda awkwardly concluded that his low level and the interaction takes a turn neither of them expected. He then leaped to the reckless idea that if he gained that experience now, his strength might rise fast. As he imagined that possibility, Auda wondered if this bizarre skill might actually give him a chance to save the country, while Luclara and the others reacted with strained embarrassment. The heavy stares around him made Auda panic, and he begged them to stop looking at him as if he had impure intentions. A female knight hurriedly defended him by saying his skill was unique, but she also warned that some people in the room valued propriety even more than survival. Auda grew self-conscious and wondered if his face had really looked that shameless, then irritably thought that if they hated that kind of gaze, they should not present themselves in such distracting ways. The knight fired back right away, insisting there was a practical reason for it because dragon-riding knights had to make sure their armor would not injure their mounts. Hearing that explanation, Auda realized there really had been a reason for her outfit and felt even more embarrassed by his assumption. Luclara gently admitted that Tiamat had gone too far, but she also said the warning was still right, that no one should be looked at that way if they did not want it. Auda bowed his head and sincerely apologized, still rattled by how far his thoughts had gone. Luclara quietly said there was still one other possibility they had to consider. Blushing with visible effort, Luclara admitted that forming a deeply personal bond with Auda might also turn his skill into a source of hope. She then reminded him that many people in the country had no way to escape the crisis closing in on them. Speaking as a princess, Luclara said she believed she had a duty to face that reality herself. A knight reacted in alarm and tried to stop her, shocked by the weight of what Luclara was implying. As the night deepened over the castle, Luclara remained resolute while Auda sat frozen before her, crushed by the gravity of her decision. Luclara moved closer and reached for her clothing, making Auda stare in stunned confusion as the moment all of a sudden became real. Flustered and sweating, Auda asked if she was truly certain about going through with it. Luclara apologized softly and admitted she was very nervous, but she did not take back her resolve. Luclara calmly said that as the princess, protecting the nation and taking responsibility for summoning Auda were both duties she had to bear herself. Auda clung to her words about responsibility, then hesitantly asked Luclara her age, and she revealed that she had turned 18 that year. Hearing that, Auda was struck by the fact that someone so young was already carrying the burden of an entire nation. Luclara then quietly revealed that her father and mother had been lost in the eruption. Even through her sadness, Luclara said she still wanted to protect everyone who had always supported her, including Tiamat and many others dear to her. Auda fell silent, sweating and staring downward as the weight of Luclara's resolve left him shaken. Struggling through his embarrassment, Auda asked whether Luclara had ever gone through something like this before. The scene shifts into a decision neither can easily undo. Shaken and trembling, Luclara asked Auda to take the lead, be gentle, and help her through what came next. As Luclara moved into his arms, Auda froze in shock while she looked up at him with anxious trust, pushing the moment past the point of no return. As Luclara leaned close, both of them froze in shock, and Auda could barely process how far things had gone. A system message all of a sudden informed Auda that a first bond milestone had been achieved, and his level instantly surged upward. Stunned by the notification, Auda realized that even limited closeness was enough to raise his power, leaving him speechless. Luclara looked flushed and emotionally overwhelmed, showing that she was enduring the weight of the ritual through sheer fragile resolve. More system messages declared that the encounter had granted an enormous amount of experience, and Auda's level skyrocketed to an absurd degree. The system then confirmed that Luclara had reached the ritual's intended peak, and Auda gained a new ability called Future Sight. As the room fell quiet and the curtain swayed by the window, the intensity of what had just happened settled over them. Lying there in a daze, Auda bitterly reflected that even if it had been for the kingdom's sake, it had still come to this with Luclara. Luclara told Auda that throughout the entire ritual she had felt only his kindness, and that she truly believed she could entrust herself to him. Drawing close with tearful relief, Luclara admitted she was grateful that her first ordeal of this kind had been with Auda, leaving him stunned by the trust she placed in him. Iguchi Aura never imagined acceptance could feel this reassuring, especially from a hospital bed in a world that still didn't feel like his. Luclara Harm admitted the ritual had begun as a duty to measure Auta's power, but shame gripped her when she remembered how badly she had lost her composure. Auta quickly told Luclara he truly didn't mind and that none of it was her fault, yet her embarrassment still wouldn't let go. Trying to escape the awkward silence, Luclara asked what Auta's status looked like now. Auta used the Beister ring and brought up his status screen. The moment Luclara saw it, she went so still that she could barely believe what was in front of her. Auta's status showed an impossible leap, his level soaring from 18 to 401 as every stat rose with it. Luclara could only stare at the number, while Auta was left wondering if 401 was really that unbelievable. Luclara explained that level 100 marked a master, level 1000 meant hero, and anything past 500 entered the realm of myth. Hearing that scale, Auta finally understood that level 401 had already launched him deep into master territory. Luclara explained that masters wielded highly refined power, yet even then, gaining this much in a single night made no sense. Auta stared back at her and admitted that the results sounded completely insane. Luclara clarified that the truly impossible part was one ritual giving him roughly 400 levels in a single jump. She added that if growth like this happened 4 times, Auta would already be nearing the mythic realm. Luclara then steadied herself and explained that most of this surge came from a major initial bonus, so future gains would never come this easily again, and Auta accepted that. Auta still stayed optimistic and said his level might keep rising if they changed tactics and tried different methods. That suggestion made both of them freeze as the implication landed all at once. As silence filled the room, even the distant castle view seemed to weigh on them, and Auta sank into thought. Auta reflected that Luclara had put herself through this for the kingdom's sake even though they had only just met, and the thought left him torn between guilt and admiration. Then his status updated again, revealing that another attempt had pushed him from 401 to 410. A grim notice appeared right after it, warning that only 6 days remained before the demonic horde attacked. The kingdom below the castle looked peaceful, which only made that merciless countdown feel closer. In the castle room, Auta lay in bed as morning light poured in, waking to a body that felt nothing like the one he used to know. Auta stretched and felt pure relief rush through him, realizing how incredible it was to wake in a body that finally felt healthy. Looking at himself, Auta admitted this new life had already given him things he had only ever dreamed about before. He noticed Luclara beside him and found her strangely comforting just after waking, while she softly called his name, flushed with emotion, and the moment becomes too heavy for either of them to ignore. Auta looked stunned for a moment, then softened as the weight behind her words truly reached him. As they remained under the blanket, Luclara nervously told Auta that something was making the situation awkward, and the air tightened at once. Luclara instantly went rigid with shock and embarrassment as the tension spiked. Auta admitted that Luclara was the one who had left him so unsettled, which only made her freeze in deeper embarrassment. He added that there might even be an extra benefit depending on the time of day, sounding half serious and half teasing. Auta then awkwardly pointed out that first thing in the morning made the situation especially hard to ignore. Seeing how tense he already was, he drew Luclara's attention to it, leaving her even more shaken. Auta reasoned that just as a tired body seeks rest, a person cornered by fear and danger might rely on emotional closeness even more desperately. A status notice revealed that their time together that morning had raised Auta from level 410 to 415 and upgraded future sight from level 1 to level 2 after Luclara had supported him for 2 straight days. Auta checked the screen and confirmed the new level, the improved stats, and the strengthened future sight skill. Sitting on the bed beside Luclara, he summed it up by saying it was a normal level increase and that future sight had also reached level 2. Luclara quietly realized that if skills could level up too, then what they were doing might matter even more than they thought. Auta concluded that if that was true, they would probably need to do it again tomorrow, leaving Luclara stunned and red-faced. Luclara blushed, realized the others might have useful skills, and said they needed to hurry and gather that knowledge. Still flustered, Luclara called to Auta and proposed collecting everyone's wisdom, and he agreed right away. Auta cautioned that whether a skill was useful depended entirely on the enemy they faced and the terrain around them. He said he needed full details about the incoming monsters and the region's geography before he could judge anything. Luclara promised to write him a letter of introduction to the archives, and the interaction becomes difficult to navigate. As she prepared the document, Luclara said she would also handle the necessary arrangements, which made Auta pause in confusion. Luclara explained that since the crisis began, many people had already asked for asylum in other countries. She grimly added that during major monster disasters, it was common for the skilled to be sent to supposedly safer nations, while ordinary civilians were left behind to die on the front lines. Hearing that, Auta realized this ruthless logic was treated as simple common sense in this world. Auta stood and declared that even under those assumptions, he would still find a strategy that could secure victory. Luclara shyly called out to Auta and stopped him with a warm smile touched by embarrassment. She told Auta she had something she wanted to give him, making him turn back before leaving. Auta paused in surprise and placed a hand on his chest as he listened. Luclara said the outfit looked perfect on him, and Auta thanked her while taking in the room around him. Auta looked pleased and slightly embarrassed as he accepted her praise. With Luclara's letter in hand, Auta checked the floor plan and decided the archives should be nearby. Before he could keep moving, someone found him, and Auta looked up in confusion as she approached. The newcomer introduced herself as Tiamat Pendrago, Luclara's childhood friend and a royal guard knight. Tiamat coldly told Auta that she did not believe he could save the country. When Auta asked who stood before him, he was told it was Lady Tiamat, while the nearby girls watched the tense exchange. Tiamat said they should continue the conversation somewhere else and led Auta away from the hall. She brought him out to an open field, where the mood turned heavy as Auta waited for what came next. Tiamat revealed that the monster horde approaching this time was estimated at 1.5 million strong. She added that a threat on that scale was classified as nation-destroying, making the danger impossible to misunderstand. As Auta tried to grasp what that really meant, Tiamat began comparing it to other disasters in the same class. She explained that the category included catastrophes, such as massive volcanic eruptions and meteor impacts. Tiamat told him to imagine that level of destruction and said even 1,000 experts with average stats of 400 would still be powerless against it. Auta then asked Tiamat what she was truly trying to tell him. Tiamat finally gave her answer and urged him to take Luclara and run. She explained that Luclara's rare future sight was valued across the entire world, and if she sought asylum, countless nations would welcome her. Auta realized that if they stayed, countless ordinary citizens would die, and he knew Luclara would never accept abandoning them. Tiamat told him he would have to take Luclara away by force and make her accept the choice to survive. She urged him to tell Luclara to keep living for Tiamat and everyone else who would fall. Auta finally understood what she meant, and was shaken by the image of Tiamat dying. Tiamat said that outcome was acceptable to her as long as Lady Luclara survived. She added that she had accepted this kind of loss long ago, ever since her own parents passed away. The story shifted to Pendrago, a land where humans and dragons lived side by side. Tiamat explained that something similar had happened when Lady Luclara's parents once came to their kingdom for talks with the king. During that visit, Luclara's mother's future sight activated, and she foresaw the earth shaking and a volcano erupting. But because her foresight was weaker than Lady Luclara's, the kingdom only learned about the disaster on the very morning it struck. As disaster closed in, the adults ordered the children onto wyverns and sent them somewhere safe without delay. The elder insisted that Luclara's parents were honored guests and begged them to escape together with the children. Luclara's parents refused to take priority, saying 4 children should take the seats instead of 2 adults. While the children were flown out on wyverns, Luclara's parents took a dragon carriage and raced across the land. Then, the eruption finally began, and the mountain exploded with terrifying force. Even as the catastrophe struck, they had never intended to throw their lives away. They truly believed they would survive and return alive. They kept dreaming of a future where they could laugh together again, brushing aside the danger as one more terrible trial to overcome. They clung to that hope right until the end. But the volcano consumed everything, leaving behind only the desperate plea for Luclara to live. Luclara broke down in tears as the memory of her parents' final escape and sacrifice overwhelmed her. The young man realized that if he accepted the dying wish of someone Luclara loved, then she would be forced to keep carrying that pain. He looked up at Luclara and quietly weighed what that choice would do to her heart. He said he understood that Luclara wanted to live, but if they kept going like this, she would only end up crying. Luclara was shaken when she heard that, and she began to admit that he might be right. He bluntly explained that he could not respond to someone who was crying, making his refusal impossible to misunderstand. Luclara stared at him in total shock, unable to process how directly he had said it. He tried to soften the moment by saying it would be a waste for someone as remarkable as her to die, catching her completely off guard. Even with all her training and composure, Luclara's resolve crumbled under his blunt honesty and unexpected words. Then, Luclara pulled him into a sudden embrace and the scene grows awkward with no easy escape. Auta staggered, stunned, and demanded to know what had happened so fast. Red-faced and trembling with anger, Luclara clung to him and admitted his reckless words had made her want to hit him. Then she pulled back and demanded an explanation, saying that if she was wrong, she would accept whatever he said. Auta hurried to tell her she had not misunderstood, then awkwardly confessed he had been thinking something inappropriate enough to deserve that reaction. Luclara burst out in disbelief and accused him of crossing worlds for such a disgraceful reason, leaving Auta trapped under her fury. Still flustered, Luclara muttered that his absurd logic sounded strangely familiar, like she had heard that kind of nonsense somewhere before. Auta raised a hand and argued that all living creatures are born and continue their kind, while Luclara could only stare at him. He kept going, claiming that the drive to continue living was tied to life itself, and that stronger conviction meant a stronger will to live. Keeping her distance, Luclara stared at him and asked in disbelief what he was even trying to say. Auta finally concluded that with a kind and sincere girl like Luclara, what he wanted was a gentle, happy future together, though his blunt wording made the air painfully stiff. Auta declared that he would never accept any plan that made a sweet and honest girl like Luclara cry. Luclara stared at him in shock and realized he was not just shameless, but someone whose bizarre logic was tangled with real kindness. Auta apologized and admitted that he had gone too far. Then he revealed that in his previous life, he had lived in a hospital. Auta explained that the only people he ever spoke to were doctors and nurses, so he had copied foolish behavior from manga and anime without understanding real human interaction. He said that because of that life, he treasured health and life itself so deeply that he could not treat even a stranger's life as disposable. Looking at Luclara, Auta added that her parents must have fought to live until their very last moment. Luclara fell silent and admitted that in trying so hard to avoid the worst outcome, she had forgotten to pursue the best one. Auta reflected that maybe he was too obsessed with ideals. At last the tension cracked, and the two of them let out a small, relieved laugh. Luclara smiled softly and said that perhaps Auta's lightness could balance her own heaviness. Auta looked at her armored form and all of a sudden blurted out that it looked cute, leaving Luclara openly baffled. He quickly tried to laugh it off and insisted she should not misunderstand, claiming he only meant to respect her professionally and awkwardly adding that she could hit him if he looked improper. Luclara reacted at once, and Auta flinched as her gauntlet shot forward with real force. With a serious expression, Luclara accepted his condition and declared that if that was what he wanted, then they should proceed. Auta doubled down, and the moment takes an uncomfortable turn. Their fists met in a firm pact, turning the awkward exchange into shared resolve. Luclara then leaned in with bright determination and urged Auta to use his otherworldly thinking to find a strategy where she would not have to cry. She pushed that hope even further and asked for a future where everyone in the kingdom could still smile. Left alone with that weight, Auta reflected that a horde of 1.5 million monsters was a disaster on the scale of a meteor strike or a massive volcanic eruption. Auta realized that at this rate, everyone would die, and the true scale of the crisis crashed down on him. He right away asked for detailed information about the incoming monsters and the surrounding terrain so he could build a plan. Luclara agreed to write him a letter of introduction to the archives, and the situation becomes awkward. As he left, Auta swore to save Luclara and Tiamat without exception, making that resolve deeply personal. That resolve swelled even further, and he decided he would save every woman in the country. In a reckless surge of confidence, Auta pushed that vow to an absurd extreme and declared he would gather a huge group of women around him. He arrived at the vast archive room, surrounded by towering shelves and piles of books, and prepared to search for an answer there. A book all of a sudden opened by itself, and Ku appeared as she explained that this particular volume was one she wanted to treasure. Ku then gathered more books and quietly added that she wanted to treasure those as well, revealing how deeply she valued them. As Ku rapidly read through the books at incredible speed, Auta realized he was witnessing a level of speed reading far beyond normal study. Watching Ku work with such focus, Auta found himself thinking she looked especially impressive like that. He awkwardly tried to speak to her in the middle of the archive, but Ku remained bent over her work among the towering stacks. Before he could understand what was happening, a sudden movement startled him and sent him reeling. Auta jerked back in shock as he realized he had just seen something he clearly had not meant to see. Flustered but honest, he admitted to himself that the accidental glimpse had been startling. Ku right away panicked, bowed over and over, and tearfully apologized to Auta for the embarrassing accident. Then she anxiously explained that presenting herself so carelessly was extremely rude, making her distress even more obvious. Trying to calm her, Auta assured Ku not to worry and said the moment had simply caught him off guard. Still shaken, Ku nervously added that she was grateful to the craftsman responsible for making such clothing. As the tension eased slightly, Ku shifted the conversation and began to say there was something important about Auta himself. Ku all of a sudden bowed and apologized again for her earlier mistake, then formally introduced herself as the one who managed the archives. Ku explained with quiet conviction that books carried a nation's history and preserved its culture. She went on to say that even if a country fell, books could still prove that its people had once lived, leaving Auta listening in surprise. Ku explained that Luclara had ordered her to choose which books should be preserved, and she had been working on that task since the day before. As she reread them, Ku came to understand just how important the task was, and she confessed that every single book had begun to feel necessary. Hearing how serious she was, Auta privately wondered if Ku saw him as some kind of watchdog sent to monitor her. Auta then held up his letter of introduction from the princess and reminded Kuo that he had come to save the country. Kuo looked at him and recognized that he was Auta, the person said to have come from another world. Auta casually confirmed it, and Kuo reacted as if that detail changed everything. Ku then revealed a troubling condition, saying that if Auta formed a certain close connection with someone, he could copy that person's power. Auta was stunned that something so important had been written so bluntly, and the disbelief slipped right out of him. Ku explained that Luclara was simply saying the things she herself found too difficult to express. As Auta processed that, he pictured Luclara with awkward sympathy and began to understand her side. Auta calmly confirmed that the condition was true and explained that he could copy another person's power through direct contact. Ku excitedly declared that she had learned something valuable, but Uta could only stare at her reaction. Though the whole exchange still felt strange to him, Auta forced himself to refocus on why he had come. Auta asked for information about the surrounding terrain and the monsters, and Ku right away promised to help, but she could. Ku rushed to a map and began explaining that they were in the royal capital, using the terrain as her starting point. As Ku launched into a rapid explanation of the kingdom's size, mountains, slopes, and regional divisions, Auta realized she got carried away whenever she was excited. Watching Ku to ramble on so happily, Auta decided her enthusiasm was charming and let himself relax. Ku continued explaining the map, noting that a wide river lay to the west and reasoning that if the monsters were coming from that direction, the river could become a key part of their defense. Auta right away agreed and concluded that using the river in their strategy would be a smart move. Then he pressed for more, saying he also needed precise details about the monsters, while Ku hesitated and admitted there were many different kinds. Auta accepted that problem and decided they should first use Future Sight to identify exactly what kind of monsters were approaching. As he prepared to activate the skill, Auta realized that Future Sight seemed overwhelmingly powerful, but he sensed a serious price behind it. The moment the vision struck, his eyes widened as the burden of the skill slammed into him all at once. Auta was flooded with a terrifying image of monstrous creatures closing in, and the sheer force of that future vision shook him to the core. He collapsed over the table in exhaustion, and Ku cried out in alarm as Auta felt as if he had just run dozens of kilometers in a single instant. Flustered but thinking fast, Ku concluded that the farther into the future he looked, the heavier the strain became, while nearer events placed a lighter burden on him. Before she could finish, Auta all of a sudden lurched again, and Ku called out to him in renewed panic. While sketching out the enemy formation, Auta concluded that even a monster horde was divided into several separate squads, and Ku was struck by how impressive his drawing was. Auta said that creatures like the ones he drew were positioned at the center of the horde. Ku identified them as goblin-type monsters, and Auta right away checked whether all of them belonged to that group. Ku explained that just as a tiger still belonged to the cat family, these monsters shared the same broad type, which meant their weaknesses were similar too. She added that there were many other kinds as well, including war monsters mixed in and even aerial creatures above them. As Ku spread out sketch after sketch of the different enemy types, Auta sat back and absorbed the growing scale of the threat. Breathing hard from the strain, Ku asked if those were all the monsters he had managed to see, and Auta said he still had more to explain about the weaker-looking ones. He then rapidly scribbled another image so frantically that Ku stared in shock at what he was trying to capture. Auta revealed that deeper within the horde he had seen a massive black shadow, and the tension collapses into something unexpected. He then turned to their own strength and asked about their side's forces, so Ku answered that they had 2,000 knights and 4,000 adventurers, and that armed adult civilians could at least deal with goblins. Ku admitted with visible worry that many skilled people would probably flee to other countries instead of staying to defend their homeland. She explained that in a monster disaster, talented survivors gathering in safer inland nations was considered normal, because the real nightmare was humanity being wiped out little by little after defeat. Auta laid out the comparison clearly. The enemy numbered about 1.2 million on the ground and 300,000 in the air, with an unknown presence deeper behind them, while their side had only 2,000 knights, 4,000 adventurers, and whatever civilians remained after expected desertion. As Ku brought over records, Auta asked whether there was a list of skill holders who would stay behind, or at least help with preparations. Looking over the documents, Auta learned that very few were even willing to help prepare, and he bitterly realized that the powerless were always the ones left behind in the end. Slumping forward, Auta confessed that what hurt most was watching the weak get abandoned. Blushing but serious, Ku shyly proposed a deeply personal way to help him, presenting it as something he could choose to do with her. From above the cluttered room, Q explained that if his future sight combined with her own skill, it might evolve into something stronger. Startled and flustered, Aura admitted that improving his skill was not the issue, but that her proposal felt far too bold. Just as that idea hung between them, Q hesitated and warned him that there was still one problem. Q shyly confessed that she did not actually know what unsafe contact was, and the true risk behind her bold proposal finally surfaced. In the archive, she said she would have to leave that part to Aura, and he was left stunned that she did not even understand the word she had used. Q explained that she had assumed it was some sacred ritual tied to wisdom, and Aura realized just how far off her understanding had gone. As Q looked at him with pure innocence, Aura finally grasped that her earlier boldness had come from total ignorance. Trying to explain without letting the situation spiral, Aura carefully asked whether Q at least knew what reproduction meant. Q quickly searched for a reference and explained that reproduction was an act performed to leave offspring behind. Aura awkwardly reduced it to a gentler way of saying that, and Kui accepted his explanation without hesitation. Taking him completely literally, Ku calmly concluded that if they were going to proceed, she should first return herself to her original state, and the misunderstanding all of a sudden turned dangerous. With her face red but her gaze steady, Ku urged him to begin, showing she was ready even though she still understood almost nothing. Ku reasoned that reproduction was something nearly all living things experienced at least once, and her calm logic only made Aura more alarmed. Aura panicked as the truth hit him that Kyo was completely unprepared, and the awkwardness crashed down all at once. He told himself he could not pull away now, believing that helping Ku and growing stronger might both come from this mistake. The instant he moved too, all of a sudden, Ku cried out in shock and clung to him in confusion. Flustered and trembling, Ku protested that this was nothing like what she had imagined, exposing just how badly everything had been misunderstood. The library went utterly silent, and the situation shifts into territory no one prepared for. Ku then leaned against Aura with an easy smile, while he sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Ku softly thanked Aura for trying to explain things to her, and her innocent sincerity only left him more speechless. With a warm, satisfied smile, Ku admitted that it had made her feel relieved. Still red-faced and shy, Ku asked if he would help her again, and the pressure on Aura instantly returned. As they sat there together, Ku all of a sudden wondered what had happened to the skills, and a system message began to surface. A system message announced that helping QF fast learning and perfect memory through the ordeal had granted Aura information processing level 1 and fast talking level 1, along with descriptions of both skills. Reading the results in the library, and the situation shifts into territory no one prepared for, Ku then changed focus and calmly told Aura they should check whether Future Sight could evolve. As another message appeared, Aura was stunned to learn that Future Sight and information processing had fused, and that a god-named skill called Collect Lepra was now being formed. The next screen explained that Laplace collection was a skill that could derive the correct answer from whatever information stood before him. Sitting beside Kuo, Aura realized at once that this ability existed on a completely different level from everything else he had gained. Kuo stared in shock and repeated that it was a god-named skill, making it clear she understood exactly how abnormal that was. While Aura questioned whether anyone could really gain something this overwhelming so easily, Ku explained that the skill carried the name of one of the 10 true gods of Runonvi and belonged to the realm of myth. Ku said it would not be strange for Aura to gain powers beyond common sense, because she truly believed he was a powerful soul summoned to save their country. Aura turned toward her in silence, visibly shaken by the strength of her belief. After hearing Ku's absolute faith in him, Aura agreed they should test the new god-named skill right away, with Ku standing behind him. Aura placed his hand down and desperately asked the divine wisdom of the skill for a way to break through 1.5 million enemies alone. At first, he went still as something seemed to answer, and an endless flood of information began pouring into him. Then, the overload hit without mercy, and Aura screamed as unbearable pressure tore through his mind. He collapsed onto the floor in agony, and Ku rushed to his side in alarm, calling out to him. Struggling to recover on the couch, and the interaction becomes difficult to navigate. Aura then added that even worse, he still could not see the future at the moment it mattered most. Ku calmly reasoned that he was trying to solve far too much at once and suggested he begin with something simple, like identifying Ku's weaknesses. Hearing that, Aura accepted her reasoning and admitted that her idea made sense. Aura then fixed a serious gaze on Ku, preparing to test the skill again with a much smaller question. Ku all of a sudden faltered as the burden on her body caught up to her, and all strength seemed to leave her. She collapsed onto the bed, breathing hard as she admitted that the power Aura had just used would be terrifying in battle. Even while lying there weakly, Ku stressed that the skill could become a deadly weapon if Aura learned to use it properly. Aura asked where he should test it, and Ku right away decided to take him to the training grounds. When she tried to stand, Ku nearly lost her balance and apologized, embarrassed that she still could not rise properly. A quiet pause lingered outside as they prepared to move, and theory gave way to the reality of a true field test. As they made their way out, Ku explained that the training grounds were where adventurers gathered to level up and measure their strength. She added that many fierce fighters trained there, but believed Aota could gather practical combat data from them. Hearing that, Aota tensed as he realized this meant real combat, not another harmless trial. He admitted to himself that in his previous life he had never hit anyone or been hit himself, which made the next step feel far heavier. Aota worried that his powers might fail in a real fight, then realized with uneasy disbelief that he had ended up with abilities straight out of the isekai stories he used to watch. They arrived at the training grounds, a vast arena lined with warrior statues that made the place feel even more severe. As Aota looked inside, he noticed that every fighter training there was a woman, and the reversed gender roles of this world hit him again. The nearby adventurer stared at Aota, and Q awkwardly explained that men normally did not come to a place like this. Surrounded by powerful fighters, Aota shrank under the pressure and felt like a fragile outsider dropped among hardened mercenaries. Ku explained that the arena floor was covered in sand to soften damage, and added that this section was used by strong adventurers who struggled to hold back. A woman in the ring shouted in frustration, demanding to know what was wrong as the match around them sharpened. One fighter slipped behind another and locked her into a restraining hold while a second onlooker watched with surprise. With a fierce grin, the dominant fighter warned that a real battle would be far crueler than this. The exchange ended in a violent impact as one combatant was blasted away and slammed hard across the arena floor. A beast-costumed girl cheerfully declared that if the fallen fighter could not get up again, then Garu would be claiming a crushing victory. Watching the brutal sparring, Lady Asuka remarked that both Laika and Garu always went too far. Lady Asuka stepped in with calm authority and reminded the wild fighter to hold back because this was only training. On the ground, Aota heard someone insist that relaxing that grip strength would be a mistake. The same fighter argued that anyone who flinched here would never survive against monsters in a real battle. As Aota looked up in confusion, a nearby woman bluntly asked why a man was even there. Another female adventurer leaned in with a mocking grin and warned that this was no place for weak men or scrawny children. Staring at the fierce woman, Aota nervously thought she looked exactly like a fantasy character made real. Ku quickly defended him, flusteredly insisting that Aota was not weak and was actually very manly. From nearby, another woman reacted with amused interest and said he looked like he might become entertaining in all kinds of ways. The woman cornered Aota with a blunt choice and told him to accept her challenge or leave at once, leaving him tense and uncertain. Aota stood facing her in the arena while she waited calmly, making it obvious she would not back down. Laika introduced herself as a level 480 brawler from Red Tempest, and the scene grows awkward with no easy escape. Seeing that Laika's level stood far above his own, Aota realized he had little choice but to deal with someone dangerously aggressive. From the side, Garu criticized Laika's habit of tormenting men and called her tastes disgusting. Garu introduced herself as a member of Red Tempest and explained that she had been raised to believe men were the ones women should protect. Dinah, another Red Tempest warrior, dryly remarked that this was still better than getting crushed by an ogre on the battlefield. Laika proposed turning the moment into a full match where anything was allowed except killing, and added that skills were permitted too. Aota grimly thought that as savage as this sounded, it was still kinder than what real monsters would do. As Aota processed her rule that anything went, Laika leaned in with a taunting grin and warned that it meant she could push him around, but she liked. Laika trembled with excitement, and her expression made it clear that Aota's resistance had only made her more intense. Aota coldly warned that the human body was fragile and implied he would not hesitate to break Laika's bones if she pushed him too far. Laika erupted in anger, dared Aota to prove it, and shouted that he should not act superior just because he was a man. From the sidelines, the others explained that Aota's remark was enough to make Laika serious, and said she treated men like playthings and forcefully dragged them into her games. As the fight began, Aota shocked the onlookers by blocking Laika's vicious strike aimed straight at his eye. Laika grinned in surprise, admitted he was better than expected, and right away lifted her fist for an even stronger follow-up. Her next attack crashed into Aota with explosive force, swallowing the clash in violent lightning. The onlookers panicked as they realized Laika was using lightning magic, then corrected themselves and explained that her true specialty, Thunder Fist, fused martial arts with lightning. Another warrior added that Laika could even use magic without chanting, proof that she was a true genius. The commentary continued, saying Laika was exactly what one would expect from an A-rank fighter, and warning that she even padded her profile with false information to deceive opponents. The onlookers were stunned, and one of them admitted that Iguchi Aota did not seem like an ordinary man at all. Aota launched himself above the massive storm of lightning, escaping the crushing blast by the thinnest margin. Aota broke into a cold sweat and realized that without his future sight, that attack would have ended him instantly. As he soared through the air, Auda was shocked by how high he had jumped and realized that his growth in this world had raised his physical ability even further. The spectators were amazed that Auda had casually evaded Laika's attacks, even though her style mixed feints with genuine killing blows. Laika stiffened in disbelief and admitted to herself that Auda had read through her move on the very first exchange. Refusing to back down, Laika poured even more lightning into her next attack and challenged Auda to handle this one. She warned that if the strike landed, Auda would be finished in a single blow as the electrified assault closed around him. Trapped inside the lightning, Auda forced himself to stay calm, believed he could do this, and found a tiny opening that made Laika flinch in surprise. Auda twisted through the attack and, awkward or not, threw himself fully into the counter in the middle of the fight. The spectators were stunned, and one woman realized Auda moved as if he knew the answer before the attack was even thrown. Another onlooker lit up and praised him as Q's Uta-sama, certain this was exactly the spectacle she had been waiting for. Even after slipping past the first strike, Auda was caught at close range an instant later and nearly lost his nerve as the follow-up rushed in. Auda declared that any attack he could predict and dodge would never be enough to bring him down. But in the very next instant, Auda admitted to himself that this was the absolute edge of what he could handle. Realizing foresight alone would not save him now, Auda lunged forward and chose to settle it with raw physical strength. The clash turned brutal as Laika overwhelmed him with force and lightning, driving him down while Auda cried out under the impact. Pinned beneath the searing current, Auda realized the lightning had even damaged parts of his clothes, leaving him exposed and humiliated before everyone. Laika rose over him in a flash of dominance, ready to finish the exchange before he could recover. Wrapped in crackling lightning, Laika slammed Auda toward the ground and declared this was exactly how she would crush him. The nearby girls stared in shock and covered their faces, unable to believe what was happening right in front of them. A woman tried to explain that it was a survival instinct triggered when someone felt their life was in danger, but even she sounded strained. The others could only mutter that her calm explanation somehow made the whole thing even harder to endure. An awkward silence fell over the group as the tall woman folded her arms, while the others stood beside her too flustered to speak. Then a sudden burst ripped through the air and shattered the tension in an instant. Both figures cried out at the same time, overwhelmed by the abrupt shock of whatever had just happened. The girls watching were left utterly stunned, and one barely managed to ask what they were even looking at. A system message appeared and announced that Laika of the Thunder Fist had hit a breaking point, while Lightning Magic Level 1 and Martial Arts Level 1 were added. Laika, flushed and furious, accused Auda of forcing something overwhelming on her and leaving her shaken and humiliated. Auda was just as rattled as he realized the intense lightning-charged clash had swallowed him in a powerful and deeply unsettling sensation. System messages kept piling up, announcing that Laika of the Thunder Fist had been pushed over the edge again and again, with bonus levels added each time. Auda saw the reckless attack coming, and realized he did not even need to rely on his skill against an opening that wide. As Laika hurled herself forward with everything she had, Auda prepared to answer seriously and end the clash. An observer explained that every time Laika was pushed past her limit, her fury only grew, and Auda's survival instinct made his body answer even harder to the danger. Akeno Aikawa grimly concluded that the two had fallen into an endless cycle. The shocked onlookers stared at the chaos in disbelief, and one blurted out that they could not seriously be expected to keep watching this. Another voice reasoned that if Laika could just be calmed down, then maybe the whole ordeal would finally stop. Auda resolved to finish the match before Laika could recover from the overwhelming after-effect still surging through her. Auda realized with alarm that this was exactly why Laika kept being driven into that same overwhelming state. The girls could only tremble and clutch at themselves in second-hand embarrassment as sparks burst around them and the madness refused to end. An onlooker realized Auda had been using weak lightning just like Laika's own power, and nervously concluded he was sending it into her to keep triggering that same reaction. 3 hours passed, and the absurd battle still refused to end. Laika finally buckled from exhaustion, her strength giving out under the non-stop strain. A system message announced that Laika of the Thunder Fist had reached her 100th breaking point, and Auda received a bonus of 100 levels. The spectators declared it a complete victory for Auda as he stood there drained but still upright. The girls stared at Laika's collapsed state in disbelief and admitted that whatever had happened was beyond intense. Someone shouted that it had been an unbelievable fight. Laika forced herself back up with a fierce grin and made it clear through her expression that she was not finished and that the next turn was hers. Auda felt dread hit him at once and admitted to himself that this was bad because he was already out of stamina. As Uta sagged from exhaustion, Laika loomed behind him, fully recovered in spirit and making it clear the nightmare cycle was about to start again. Auda slumped in total exhaustion and admitted to himself that this was bad because he had already run out of stamina. As he noticed Laika's overwhelming presence up close, Auda was stunned by how unreal the situation had become. Laika all of a sudden closed the distance, and the pressure of her approach tightened the moment even further. The nearby spectators recoiled in second-hand embarrassment and covered their faces as they realized something awkward was about to happen. Laika grabbed Ata and pulled him close, and he panicked, convinced she might actually finish him off. Blushing heavily, Laika shyly revealed that she felt relieved because she thought Ata might actually accept her despite everything. Laika awkwardly assumed she had frightened Ata because of her large build, while Ata stood frozen by the misunderstanding. Trying to steady himself, Ata hesitantly asked if she wanted to continue this later, after he had rested and recovered his energy. Laika brightened at once and eagerly offered generous payment, making it clear she was completely serious. Ata reflected that women in this world were so overwhelmingly strong that even someone as striking as Laika might struggle to find a partner. Ata hesitantly said he had a favor to ask, making the others pause in confusion. With a completely serious face, Ata bluntly proposed a gathering to help continue his ability, stunning everyone around him. The women froze in total shock, their blushing faces flashing with instant disbelief at what they had just heard. Ku panicked and protested that his request sounded far too improper, while Ata visibly realized how badly it had come out. Another woman recoiled and accused Ata of saying something outrageous after everything that had already happened. Embarrassed by the misunderstanding, she turned away while Ata stood there at a loss. Ku nervously insisted that he should explain himself properly before the confusion got any worse. As Ata turned back, Laika stepped into view, and his attention locked onto her imposing presence. Ata quickly explained that his power let him copy the abilities of women he stayed beside through the night, and that he wanted to use that strength against the monster hordes. He then desperately insisted that even his most questionable idea was meant for a greater cause, laying bare his frantic justification. The women remained flushed and shaken as Laika stared in surprise, while Kui and the others struggled to process Ata's explanation. The scene shifted to the Adventurer's Lodge, where the aftermath of Ata's desperate plan continued behind closed doors. 3 beast-eared adventurers were left exhausted and overwhelmed, making it clear Ata had carried out his power-copying method with multiple women. Ata sat drained but relieved, reflecting that the experience had worked even as it left a visible toll on him. A system message informed Ata that he had completed the process with Tama, Mika, and Kitty, and that his level had increased, though he noticed no new skills had appeared. As Ata left the room and offered his thanks, one of the women cheerfully told him they could do it again another time. Yorma Pandrago, the Adventurer's Lodge manager, brought him a refill and sternly informed him that the drink had protective effects and should be taken regularly. While Ata drank in awkward silence, Yorma looked at him coldly and remarked that he seemed far too indiscriminate. Ata reacted in surprise as Yorma admitted that, having been raised in a country where devotion to one partner was the norm, she found his behavior hard to accept. When Ata asked how she knew such a place, Yorma was startled that he had identified Tiamat as her homeland. Yorma told Ata that his eyes and even his voice reminded her of Tiamat, then revealed that Tiamat was her older sister. Ata was startled by the revelation, then realized Yorma's harsh attitude made sense if she was Tiamat's little sister. Yorma warned him that some men became popular, lost control, and pressured women who did not want it, and Ata nervously asked if she was telling him not to become that kind of man. Ata quickly agreed and praised Yorma's warning as proper advice from Tiamat's sister, adding that for now he believed she was not a bad person. Yorma stayed serious and said the real question was whether Ata was truly someone great enough to save this country. Ata brushed off the tension and cheerfully said they should move on to the next floor, while Yorma followed behind him in uneasy silence. On the next floor, they entered a busier area where several people had already gathered, making the atmosphere feel more charged. A furious bear-like beast-man flammed the table and declared that both the one making the request and the people accepting it had all lost their minds. Another adventurer looked around at the crowd and remarked that more people had shown up than expected. A long-haired man, clearly shaken by what he had witnessed, admitted that, after seeing that display right in front of him, even he could understand why people would react this way. A woman sat in silence over her meal, offering no useful reaction as the tense scrutiny continued. The next room stood empty, making it clear there was nothing more for Ata to find on that side of the floor. Ata checked another room where several girls were asleep together, but none of them showed any sign of possessing a special skill. He quietly looked in from the doorway, and the girls remained curled up in bed without revealing anything important. Ata concluded that this floor was finished, then awkwardly realized Yorma had apparently been waiting outside the whole time, which left him embarrassed. Ata noted in surprise that none of the girls on this floor had any skills at all, even though many of them had cooperated with him. Yorma explained that even a level 1 skill was considered exceptional, comparable to top-tier talent in a field like cooking. She added that this area was intended for F to D rank adventurers, so it was only natural that true skill holders were rare here. Auda accepted that explanation and said he should expect more results on the upper floors, while Yorma stayed quiet and unreadable. With that, they prepared to move on toward the C and B rank floor in search of more promising people. Auda found the floor deserted, and Yorma explained that everyone from this level had already been sent off to other countries. She added that people with better skills were moved deeper into safer nations, while the frontline countries were left to face monster disasters as expendable shields. Hearing that, Auda fell silent and could only stare ahead in troubled disbelief. He admitted that Kua had mentioned this before, but seeing the reality for himself hit him much harder than expected. Yorma then revealed that Dinah and the others were also planning to leave within 3 days, showing how far the evacuation had already progressed. Auda right away wondered if everyone could simply be evacuated together instead. Yorma told him that other nations were preparing for battle too, and they did not have the capacity to carry everyone else's burden. She explained that many ordinary citizens and low-rank adventurers in this country would cling to hope for a miracle, then stay behind and die fighting. She added that the summoning ritual had been performed for that same desperate hope, and Auda grimly realized he was the one who had answered it. Yorma concluded that the entire situation was nothing less than a worst-case scenario. Auda said he understood, but the unease on his face made it clear the weight of it still had not left him. The maid then timidly asked if he was angry, afraid she had said too much. She confessed that she had only been pushing her own fear and anxiety onto him. Auda gently told her that was only natural, and that he had simply wanted to be kind to a girl who was scared. He added that the power he had been given came with responsibility, and that answer made her lower her eyes in conflicted silence. The maid praised how broad-minded he was, her admiration obvious as he moved on ahead. Elsewhere, the scene shifted to a bath area deeper inside the building. Someone in the bath noticed movement as another woman came closer. A woman called out to Dinah and asked what she intended to do about Auda. Dinah stumbled over her answer and insisted there was nothing to do, but inside she was clearly rattled that he had suggested spending time with other girls instead of choosing only her. Her thoughts only became more tangled as she wondered whether Auda had been putting off dealing with her until the end, and that possibility unsettled her even more. She went still in horrified embarrassment, shaken by where her own thoughts were leading. Dinah instantly rejected the thought and told herself something like that could never happen. Then a sudden crash nearby tore through the moment and yanked her attention away. In that instant, she remembered the overwhelming monster she had once faced, and how helpless she had been before it. She also remembered a villager thanking her for saving the village, yet the gratitude only darkened her conflicted expression. What clung to her even more was the cruel judgment that anyone strong enough to kill a monster had to be a monster too. Dinah tried to explain away Auda's earlier reaction, telling herself he had probably just been startled by her sudden presence. But when she looked again in her memory, she saw Auda frozen in the doorway, stunned by what he had seen. The thought left Dinah flushed and rigid, as embarrassment and self-consciousness crashed over her all at once.